Well, welcome to another episode of Authors Reads. My guest today is a close personal friend who has already been on Authors Reads for his first book, and is here to talk about his second book, Nine and a Half Stories, and its author, Dave Bueche. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having me on again.
I guess the first thing I'd like to share, I think people have this image of a great media conglomerate, which is me, talking to a great author media conglomerate, which is you.
Yes.
However, we were unable to get a PDF out of Dave. S- It really is just two guys in two rooms connected by one computer.
Yes, that's the conglomerate.
Do you have I call myself Totally Honest Productions. What do you call yourself?
I don't have that's a good question. I need to come up with a name for my conglomerate.
Global Media Authors, something,
Yeah, right. Like the Panopticon author Leviathan Productions.
but with a very clean logo.
Right.
Yeah.
Something like geographic, maybe with a feather in the corner or something
I
like
was
that.
thinking a feather too, like person who's like a studly looking author drawing back a bow and arrow and letting it fly.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
There might be a place for you in my conglomerate. I like where you're going with this.
So you are cranking this writing thing. I mean, when did your previous book, Hippie Cove, come out?
Tales from Hippie Cove came out in August 2023, and then this one came out at the end of May 2024.
So do you like have a job?
Well, so a lot of this stuff that's in the book, a lot of the stories. So the book is a collection of short stories, and it's eight short stories, and then the ninth, which is the one and a half story, is a novella. The oldest of the eight short stories was written in 2000. And then all of the other eight were written somewhere between 2000 and 2023. I had always wanted to get them out into the world. So I put them together, kind of stitched them all together as a Word document. I thought this is enough for a book, like these are pretty long. And I did it, and it was 75 pages. I was like, ouch, not big enough. So then I sort of had this idea for an extended story or a novella. And so I wrote that in the fall and into the spring. So 23 and 24. And then that one's like eight, that's called The Golden Table. That one's like 85 pages long. So kind of doubled the size of the book and brought it up to a respectable length for a collection of short stories. I didn't create all this material. A lot of it was kind of sitting on the shelf, and I'm just sort of touching it up and getting it out into the world.
Is there a common theme to these stories, or is it just whatever was in the filing cabinet?
There's no common theme. I mean, one of the things that's great about short stories is it's not as much of a commitment. So you can kind of play around with, like, if you're trying to build your craft. And that's kind of what I did. Write a story in the first person, write a story in the third person, try writing one with multiple characters, write a ghost story. I've got a ghost story in here, which I always wanted to do. I always wanted to do an end of the world story. I have sort of an end of the world story in here. So short stories are a lot of fun because you can put your toe in the water, but it's not like writing a novel where you've committed a year and a half of your life and then you find out it's a dead end or you don't like it. So there's no common theme because it's kind of me trying. There's some comic stuff, there's some tragic stuff. I have 2 ultra shorts, one's like 1 page long, one's 1.5, so it's just me trying all kinds of different things, and then in the middle of doing the short stories, I wrote the novel, which is you referred to earlier, Tales for Hippie Cove, which is also available on, Amazon.
So, which story would you like to share with us today?
So, today I'd like to read from a story called Speed Date, which I think speed dating is still a thing. I think that probably Tinder and a lot of these online things have maybe crowded it out a little bit. But for anyone who hasn't done speed dating, which is just a little point in fact is how I met my wife. We're married, we have a kid, we met speed dating. You physically go somewhere, usually like a bar or a restaurant, and the tables have little table tents on them with a number. And so, say there were 10 girls, they would invite 10 guys, and you sit at each table for 5 or 6 minutes and meet someone, talk with them, and then they ring a little bell and you move on to the next person and you make a couple notes like, I like this person, or, this not a match or whatever. And then in the end, you turn in your scorecard or whatever you call it, your notes. And the big question is, I would like to see this person again, yes or no. And if the guy and the girl who met both answer that yes, then they exchange your email information and you're free to arrange a date. So that's speed dating. So this is about a
I just gotta ask,
yeah.
did you save or still have your notes on your current
No,
wife and
no,
mother
no,
of
that's funny. That would have been great to save it and frame it. No, no, I didn't. It's one of those you don't know you're going to end up getting married, right? I didn't understand the import of what I had. So
do
no.
you remember any of your thoughts that you'd
Y-
like to share? And
You know, I thought she was very pretty. We had there was sort of like a physical, she laughed at my jokes, which is always a good sign, right? The conversation flowed pretty easily. She seemed very sweet. So worked out well for me.
one other question before you start the reading
Yeah, please.
process. Has she read this short story, and did she have any memories of her speed dating experience that she shared with you?
I don't think I think it was the first time she did it. So I had done it like 4 or 5 times, and after I met her, I didn't do it anymore. So after I met her, we started going out, and that was the end of the
So set up the scene for this story.
so in this one, the main character, who is kind of a jerk, so hopefully this isn't autobiographical, he's like a real kinda Hollywood player kind of a guy. He does it and at first just picks, like, one person, doesn't get any matches, so he goes back and picks a lot of people. So he's sort of getting maybe different types of people than maybe he's used to. And he ends up matching with this girl who has just moved to LA. So he's a very jaded hipster. She is pure as the driven snow. She's from the Midwest and she's very sweet. And we kind of cut to them in the restaurant and you get a flavor of his vibe and how he looks at her.
Okay, well, let's
So if
hear
you're
it.
good at we can jump in there. She came from Montana or one of those states. Mitch was usually a good listener, but right at that moment in her story, the waitress had come by to take their drink order. A tall, shapely Asian, about 25, in a pair of low cut diesels and a backless blouse with no bra. He was momentarily blinded, flying on instruments when Cynthia got into where she grew up. But he got the gist of it, not from around here. One of the places the Republicans don't have to spend too much time campaigning in because they were pretty much a sure thing. Jesus land. Not that he had anything against her. He considered himself pretty open minded about most things. And the fact that she grew up in Kansas or Nebraska or whatever wasn't necessarily a deal killer, but her clothes just might be. She wore a plain Jane pair of Levi's, a flowered print blouse, and an oversized, comfy white sweater. She looked like one of those girls from Little House on the Prairie, if they'd ever made it as far west as Melrose Avenue. And that big sweater made it hard to check her out at all anyway. Not that that was all he cared about, but come on, it was a part of the equation, right? She apologized profusely about the drink. She had spilled a drink on him previously. I'm so sorry, Mitch. Do you need any more napkins? I guess I'm just sort of a klutz. My mom always said, Sin, we ought to put some orange cones around you because you're as dangerous as a construction site. Don't worry about it, Cynthia. I think I've got it all, said Mitch, thinking to himself that he could squeeze in a stop at the dry cleaner tomorrow before a softball game or on the way to Trevor's party later that night. Are you upset? She asked. You seem a little distracted. I'm sorry. No, not at all. I'm just thinking about a friend of mine who's going through a hard time. Kind of stuck in my mind. So tell me a little more about Nebraska, was it? Wyoming, she replied, studying him for a moment before launching back into tales of horseback riding, the 4 H club, and shoveling snow before school on February mornings. It was all he could do to feign interest for another half hour before checking his watch and announcing with great disappointment, I know, I got to get up early tomorrow, that friend I mentioned. So we better. Oh, yeah, sure, she said sympathetically. I hope everything works out all right. Just give me a minute to freshen up. Back in a shake. She headed for the bathroom, taking her purse with her. Wonder if she's doing a 1 minute makeover in there, he thought, said Mitch. Not that it would matter much after all that Farmer's Almanac stuff he'd been through in the past 2 hours. The waitress came by and Mitch paid the check, trying to make a little small talk in the process. She wasn't biting, probably just too busy, and Cynthia's return didn't help his prospects any. Anyway, he grabbed his leather jacket and motioned towards the back door. Let's cut through the back. It's quicker. I'll walk you to your car. Lead the way, she said cheerily as they walked through the empty back room, stepping into the alley behind the building. It was dark. He looked up and saw the dim outline of a non operative streetlight a few yards ahead. The alley ran for about 100 yards in either direction, crossing well lit side streets on both sides. The pools of orange light made it about halfway to where they were, and tapered off into dark shadows, leaving the middle a murky study of black and gray. Kind of spooky out here, said Cynthia. Yeah, the streetlight's out, said Mitch, pointing at a silhouetted pole across the way. Let's just go back through and walk around, she said. Mitch turned and noted the smooth, blank surface of the door. Fire exit, he said. No problem, the street's right there. His arm pointed to the sidewalk, the manicured Spanish bungalows floating in the well lit distance. She nodded, and they walked together. They were halfway there when two guys stepped silently out of the shadows and blocked their path. They were dressed in oversized chinos and wife beaters. One had a shaved head and the other long, greasy hair. The one with the hair stood in front, holding a wicked looking knife casually in his right hand. The other, a few steps behind, was fingering something in his right front pocket, his head slowly panning left to right, keeping an eye on the larger situation. Out for a little stroll, said the first. He saw Cynthia instinctively take a step back. They were lined up like pawns at the start of a chess game, mirror images, with him and the knife guy facing off, and Cynthia and the skinhead one square diagonally back. We don't want any trouble, said Mitch, trying to sound confident. Of course you don't. Nobody does. It just finds you, bitch. He brought the knife up to chest level, smiling, letting him take it in if he hadn't already. I've got $80 and you can have what's in her purse. Just don't hurt me, said Mitch, his voice now quavering. He reached for his wallet, and the one in front lunged, just a feint, but making the point. What the fuck are you doing, SA? He hissed. Just getting my wallet. Please don't hurt me. Us. Nice and slow, homeboy. Mitch reached into his back pocket and pulled out the wallet, offering it gingerly with a noticeably shaky hand. What you got back there, Chica? Give it up, like your little bitch boyfriend. That's not all she's going to give up, said the other, laughing. A shot rang out behind him, incredibly loud, and he jumped, instinctively bringing his hands up next to his head and crouching. The bullet hit a dumpster 10 feet away behind the muggers. Must have been empty because it made a hellacious sound, taking a full second to drop off. They both were staring past him and their mouths wide open in shock. Mitch looked over his shoulder to see Cynthia holding a revolver rock steady with both hands, a perfect shooter's stance. You, drop the knife in the wallet, she barked. He hesitated, more from shock than defiance. Last time I say it, she said calmly. Next one's going in your chest. He dropped both and raised his hands, palms open, completely obedient. You, what's in your pocket? She said to the other one, not missing a beat. Take it out and slowly set it on the ground. Any quick moves and you're gone. He timidly reached into his right front pocket and pulled out his own knife, the blade still folded. He bent down and carefully set it on the ground in front of him, adopting his partner's stance when he finished. Get back behind me here, Mitch, said Cynthia. I don't want any blood on you if one of these idiots does something stupid. That really unhinged them, and Mitch noticed the one in back, the one who was talking about everything she was going to give up, was visibly shaking. She didn't acknowledge him as he stepped behind her, the gun and her resolute gaze still locked in on the men across the alley. Now, both of you maggots turn around and run as fast as you can. If I ever see you around here again, I'll kill you and claim self defense. And if you slow down or try anything funny, you're going to feel a slug in your back a half second before you hit the pavement. Got it? They both nodded, their eyes wide, pupils dilated. Go, she yelled, motioning with the barrel of the gun. They turned and ran, no hesitation, no moment of reckoning, pure fear and survival instinct. As they moved down the alley, she stood with her gun raised, eyes narrowed, apparently completely ready to make good on her promise. Mitch started to say something, attempting to reframe the event into something that had a vague continuity with their previous hours spent drinking mojitos and checking sports scores on the TV over her shoulder. Shh, she said dismissively. Wait till we're sure they're gone. They ran, becoming brighter as they entered the light from the street lamp on the sidewalk, skidding around the corner and out of sight, one of them casting the quickest sideways glance, spotting Cynthia with her revolver still drawn, and then disappearing around the edge of the furthest building. I'll stop it there.
Great.
Cynthia. Yeah, she did a little more than he counted for, right? With all her 4-H stuff came in handy.
I gotta ask, do all your stories have that kind of sense of humor, or is there a uniform, at least toned through your 9.5 stories?
I would say this one, and maybe it doesn't come across because that scene is the big drama point I just read you, right? But it's sort of a dark comedy about don't be so sure who you are and who somebody else is. There's one or two others that kind of have that vibe. And then I would say there's some others like the End of the World one and some of the other ones that are pretty much straight dramatic, and it's not, I don't know what you'd call it, they're not satirical, or there's a few different tones that I write in, I would say.
I would say, having heard this one and read the tales from Hippie Cove, you have sort of a dry, sardonic, detached sense of humor about things. And I think in your characterization of,
Mitch, yeah.
yes, uh,
A lot of guys like Mitch in LA.
easily recognizable archetype, as they
Yeah,
say.
totally.
I put on my professor's hat for that expression. Did you notice that?
Yeah, it was great. It was great.
Yeah. Was the corduroy jacket a little bit too much?
You need a globe and a little thing of brandy too, you know?
Leather patches on
Yeah,
the
leather
jacket?
patches on the
Yeah,
jacket.
yeah, yeah.
Exactly, exactly.
I thought, because we're doing something audio, I should go for it visually.
Yeah, and you
Yeah.
you brought you brought it, Dan.
Well, that's the commitment. When,
Mission accomplished, as
when
George Bush said once.
when you have a worldwide conglomerate
Yeah.
working for you, I think the production assistants were scrambling to get the appropriate look going for me.
When you're bringing that level of organization to bear, you know what I mean? It all just snaps together.
And I think it was a good visual. Watching the entire thing was like an indie race, and then the car pulls into the pit stop, and then everyone springs into
Oh,
action.
oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're going for. I mean,
Right.
every production meeting we have a practice.
Good to hear. I'm learning a lot. I'm going to use a lot of these things in my conglomerate.
Well, I would say that time spent rehearsal is never wasted,
Yes.
especially when they're all focused on you.
Hmm.
When they realize and actually not only visualize, but do the activities to make you look better. That's when it all comes together.
And it's very rewarding for them.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everybody needs a reason to keep, you know what I mean, to get up in the morning. And if I can be that reason for the people in my conglomerate, that's just a way I can give back. Is how I see it.
Let me tell you a little secret. You don't have to pay them much. They can Xerox as many copies of their resume as they want, or one copy of their script.
That's right.
Or
Ergonomic chairs, like
I'm a big on ergonomic
yeah, I
chairs.
mean, I don't pay them much, but it's a very nice work environment, I feel like.
And if they want to take an extra 5 minutes for lunch to have a meeting with someone, who am I to stand in the way of their dreams?
If they need a little extra money, sometimes I let them do yard work for me.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Make sure you get one that sort of cleans up after themselves, because
mm,
there's nothing worse than pulling up the driveway and running over a pile of leaves.
oh, that's a deal killer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And you
hear you.
try to tell it to them. They whine about, they've already raked up all the leaves, but
Right. And then you hold a leave up and say, well, what is this?
what is this?
Yeah.
And why is this one still out?
Why is this here? Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, somebody has to teach the next generation accountability, you know, And for us, I think it was, the soldiers who stormed Normandy Beach. And for them, I think it's, the work they're doing, the yard work for the conglomerate, like there's different ways you can be the greatest generation.
And it has to come from within,
Right.
but it has to come from us giving it to them.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
And also, they can do that by buying your book.
That's another way people can make things just a little bit better in the world. You know what I mean?
Sure, buy multiple copies and give them to all their friends.
Buy multiple copies and keep different copies in different places in your house. I own 5 pairs of shoes, 6, 7, 8 pairs of shoes. Like, why not buy 8 of my books and put them in different places?
Now, back to this specific story. Now, has your wife read this book? And is she the one most likely to pull a gun on two muggers in your relationship?
I don't see her pulling a gun out of her purse and standing up to the guys. I mean, I don't I don't see a lot of people doing that, right? Right. That's not, I don't see myself doing that. No. But yeah, she's read all the stories over the years. She's a faithful reader.
And you mentioned something about a ghost story that's also in this collection.
And my ghost story that's in the book called Unfinished Business is about a contract killer that is now being haunted by sort of weird zombified versions of people he's put contract hits out on that are kind of coming back into the world and trying to get him, and he's on the run, but only he can see them, but they're physically here. Like if one of them came and swept its hand across a table, you would see all the stuff flying off the table. So he sees what's going on. Everyone else in the world is like, oh my god, what just happened? Anyway, that's my kind of Stephen King. Like, I wanted to step into his genre and write a ghost stories.
So, what is next for the writing machine that is Dave Boucher?
um well, I'll promote this one for a little bit. I have an outline of another novel, and this one is going to be a detective story, which is another genre I've always wanted to write. So it'll be a first person from the point of view of a detective, a
Is
private
it
eye.
noir like?
Yeah, it's noir. He's a private investigator. He's not a detective. He's a private investigator. And there's a little tie-in to the book because the story in brief, someone comes to see him, as in all noir stories, someone comes to the private investigator to enlist their services, and that kind of leads you into the story. And it's a grandfather that says, my granddaughter committed suicide, and I know she would never kill herself, and I know it has something to do with this no good boyfriend of hers. You've got to find out about him. And it turns out the boyfriend is this biotech marvel who's kind of dropped off the map, who was working on a drug that was to cure Alzheimer's, but it was also a mix of MDMA, or I think what the kids today call Molly, ecstasy. And it had some crazy properties that no one counted on. And he's using these properties. It's almost sort of like gives him the ability to radically influence people. But the tie in is the novella in my current book called The Golden Table is about a lot of it takes place at a cult in 1969 in Chatsworth, and this biotech giant grew up in the cult. So there's a little kind of connection between this book and that one. But the book is basically the private investigator trying to track this guy down, going through this whole series of suicides and people doing crazy things and beginning to realize this guy's got some kind of psychic power or his drug he created or who knows what. So he's got to be real careful when he stands up to him because this guy can make people do things that they wouldn't normally want to do. So
Is
that's
there a
and I,
dame?
yes, there's a girl, the ex lover of the brilliant, but he's fatally flawed, and she thought she could save him, and she ends up kind of connecting with the private investigator, and it's kind of them against the guy. And the working title right now is Chrysalis.
Well, when Chrysalis comes out, we'll talk about it here on Authors Reads.
Thank you again. It's always great being on your show, Dan.
Okay, I'll hit the stop recording button, which I have control over. That was my June 2024 Authors Reads interview with Dave Boucher. If you'd like me to pass along a message to Dave, you can email me at djng at earthlink.net. If you have written something and would like to get it out there via a podcast, you can contact me at djng at earthlink.net. Questions or comments in general about the podcast can be directed to me, Dan McLaughlin, at djng at earthlink.net. But that's it for this time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.